Hey guys, everybody. Welcome to Now That's Debatable. I'm your host, Fantastic Assad, and I am joined with my trusty co-host, Chevalier the Humanist. Today we have Liam back. He's been on the show before, and he is back again, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the Prophecy of Tyre in Ezekiel chapter 26. You should have that up on the screen as we're live, and I'll be scrolling down just a little just so we can talk about it and may go to different verses if necessary. But it should be up on the screen for everybody. Welcome, Phantom. Welcome, Dan. We're going to go ahead and get this kicked off. Welcome back. I'm always low. There's no way to fix that without screaming. Other than, I could really turn my mic up, but then I would echo. Over the music. Yeah, the music stopped, so it's not a big deal. I can't hear you at all. Hang on, give me 1 second. My bad. Nothing should have changed. All this should have been here. Mine's on. Let me change the settings real quick. It should include you. Audio. Well, yeah, but another crowd can hear you. Okay, can you talk now?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
It's gonna take a second for it to catch up live. I can still hear you.
Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Yep. I heard it. Perfect. All right. Cool. All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Let us know if there's any more technical issues. So
Sorry, somehow it got muted. I don't know how, but it's fixed now.
so we were today's topic is about Ezekiel 26, and Liam was going to come on and explain why it is not a failed prophecy. And so just some background knowledge about the Ezekiel 26 is it's this prophecy that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, is going to come and completely destroy the city of Tyre, which is this island nation on the Phoenician coast. That he was supposed to come, wipe it out, destroy it, and it wasn't supposed to be good for anything but like drying fishing nets. They had these towers that were connecting these walls. They were going to be destroyed. At everything. Like so, the city was just going to be pretty much flattened and laid barren, good for nothing but drying fishing nets, right? So that means less like a flat surface, you know. So anyway, we know historically that Nebuchadnezzar wasn't actually able to do this. He laid a several years siege on the city. I think it was like 10 years, but he actually wasn't able to conquer it that way. So that is why I and Facade say this is a failed or a false prophecy.
Just a little additional context while we're at it. For Liam specifically, for you as well, but you may have heard me, but for everyone in the audience as well, there is the Ezekiel 26 starting in verse 6 is up on the screen currently. And I'll be scrolling through additional verses as necessary. I may also change verses if we need to go to other places for any reason. But you should have that up on the screen if you'd like to read it. And if you have any questions or comments about it, or think that either AAA or I are misrepresenting what Ezekiel 26 says about the destruction of Tyre tier, you're more than welcome to jump into the comments. So without further ado, Liam, feel free to take it away.
No, I must. Okay, cool, guys. Sorry, I didn't realize that's what we would be talking about tonight. I thought we were just going to shoot the breeze. So I'm wasn't exactly obviously like coming with I wasn't sure what we are going to talk about. I was hoping to hear. I thought we were just going to chat, and I was going to ask you guys for some convincing arguments for atheism or something like that, because I know that we had just arranged to be here, but I didn't realize that's what we were going to be going on for. I'm wondering if I should try and find you guys up here on YouTube.
Were you joking?
Hmm?
Were you joking? Oh, did you not know we were talking about Ezekiel 26?
No. Look, it's just been hectic. I'd like with us having to do this. I didn't know I was going to be. So as much as I've touched on it and just looked into
if you're not prepared for it, if you're not prepared for it, but
we can have a conversation. I'm gonna scramble and just see what I can. Just looking into all of this right now. I haven't even. I think I sent you. I think I just sent you that one link. I mean, since we did get together, so I wasn't aware. I meant to ask, and now it's already here, and here we are chatting. But I didn't. I thought we were just going to maybe shoot a breeze with kind of no agenda.
Oh, okay.
I was interested to see where we were going to go with it, so I didn't realize that because you guys obviously prepared for this one.
But we really haven't.
I mean, to the extent that I prepare for most arguments, I know what I'm talking about for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, look, for the most part, I think I can obviously just offer you some of the responses that I think why I don't think it's a failed prophecy, I guess. I mean, we could just take it from there.
So I mean, like, if you want to start, like, maybe breaking it down so verse by verse, or at least maybe.
Just quickly, what is your guys? Because I'm not tracking what we have up on the screen and stuff.
Yeah. So the long and the short is up on the screen. Ezekiel 26, starting in verse 7.
I was going to say maybe want to bring it up on my. I've got my laptop over here, so I can maybe have it and then just mute it. What was your guys that's debatable, hey?
Yeah, feel free to bring up just the passage itself. If you bring up the video, you
I've got the Bible here as well. Oh, there we go. Oh my gosh, I really am here.
Yeah, you see, there you are. There's the noise in the background. I hear it.
There we go. Okay, so you got it from verse 6.
Yeah, I'm starting in verse 6. Technically verse 7. I could scroll a little bit, but the prophecy kind of starts in verse 7. It says, For thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will bring upon Tyrus, a.k.a. Tyr, a.k.a. Tyre, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, a king of kings from the north, with horses and chariots and horsemen and companies and much people. And he shall slay with the sword thy daughters in the field, and he shall make a fort against thee, and cast a mount against thee, and lift the buckler up against thee. And he shall set engines of war against thy walls, and with his axes he shall break thy towers, by reason of the abundance of his horses. Their dust shall cover thee, the walls shall shake at the noise of the horsemen and the wheels and chariots, when he should enter into the gate, and men enter into the city, when there is made a breach. Further down, it just basically says, verse 14 to be specific, it says, I will make thee like the top of a rock. Thou shalt be a place to spread nets upon, and thou shalt build no more, for I, the Lord, have spoken it, saith the Lord God. So specifically, we have one of the things I actually like about this verse is that we have some specifics. We have a very specific person mentioned, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. We have a very specific city that he's going to wage war against. And we have the outcome that's supposed to happen. And 2 of those things did indeed happen, but I'd make a pretty strong argument against the third one, specifically verse 14, where it says it'll make it like a rock, only good to dry fishing nets, and you'll build upon it no more. And I would say that that's a pretty big failure because we know for sure that's not what happened.
Okay. Let me see here. So I would just go back from verses 3 to 6 or even 2.
Sure. Well, I can
Where it
scroll
just
back
says
up there.
yeah, it just says son of man. What can we see here? I mean, obviously there's a delay. Isn't that weird? And this is up forever, hey?
Well,
Okay.
I
So
mean, as long as
until you
YouTube
guys
exists,
yeah.
or we cancel our channel because no one's watching us and we get tired of it and it'll just go away.
You can still leave it out there. It's your what is it? Your internet footprint, whatever it is, It does say just from verse 3, therefore thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against you, O Tyre, and I'll bring up many nations against you as the sea brings up its waves.
Sure.
They shall destroy the walls of Tyre and break down her towers, and I will scrape her soul from her and make her a bare rock. She shall be in the midst of the sea, place for spreading of nets, for I've spoken, declares the Lord. And, excuse me, I just guess I'd point out that while it wasn't, Tyre wasn't absolutely razed to the ground at the end by King Nebuchadnezzar, that still happened later when Alexander came up against them.
Did not.
And then also we have the Muslims in 80.
Tyre, so that city was never completely destroyed.
The closest we get to that city being completely destroyed was probably in the 1250s by the Muslims, just after the Crusades, actually. So at that point, you probably have a total of about 300 people living in the city. But the current estimated population of Tyre is approximately 135,000.
I'm just saying that it was only in 1894 there were only about 200 people living there, and as you point out, Muslims, Crusaders, and then the Mameluke Muslims, we took in about 1291. And yes, I mean, I guess the criticism is that it says that Tyre will never be rebuilt.
Well, I mean, on top of that, it says that Nebuchadnezzar is going to do it, and that's kind of an important aspect of this. Is that I'm completely content with the first few verses of this being fairly accurate. There are indeed many of nations that have waged war on Tyre. That's kind of the perks of being a city, is that you probably will go to war if you last long enough, and if not, you probably have been conquered already. But this is why I said I kind of like this verse, and I kind of like this prophecy, specifically when it talks about Nebuchadnezzar, is because it gives us an individual person by name. It's a very specific prophecy. Whereas, and not to criticize all prophecies in the Bible or all apologetics in general, but oftentimes when I see people discussing prophecies in the Bible, they point out to some pretty obscure things. And I say, oh, well, this means this, or this could mean this. And it's kind of like the Nostradamus effect. Like you read a passage that's pretty vague, and then you interpret it to mean that he predicted 9/11, that kind of stuff. Sure, I mean, we could play that game, but we don't have to do that with this verse, which is why I like it. We don't have to do that with this chapter. We actually get a specific name and a specific city and a specific outcome. So we're not looking at some vague interpretation of what might happen to some city somewhere by somebody. It's a specific king that's supposed to wage war against Tyre and win and destroy them so badly that there's nothing left.
And again, I'd point out, yes. So, as you pointed out, Nebuchadnezzar did come. It was all of that is accurate. But there's still the idea that before this, in Ezekiel, I would obviously, and I think most people, having read it, would be that God has promised that they're going to bring up various nations, and then he specifically describes what Nebuchadnezzar is going to do.
So it did that. So that's what I was going to say. Add, it's important to remember that Nebuchadnezzar wasn't just a king; he was an emperor, and he did bring up various nations. That's what his armies were composed of, a bunch of nations. So he did that.
But no, I hear you. But I'm also saying, obviously, if someone was right, obviously, if this prophecy was written after Nebuchadnezzar had done it, then it would have been able to point out.
Well, it was written before Nebuchadnezzar attacked Tyre. Is that what you're asking?
So you just say again?
I said it was written before Nebuchadnezzar attacked Tyre.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that obviously because I believe that it's actually a prophecy that happened before Nebuchadnezzar attacked Tyre.
Yeah. So the question
However,
is,
like
like, when
I
it
said,
comes
I think
specifically to Nebuchadnezzar, why do you think it's not a failed prophecy?
because
I'm
after
fine with the first.
Nebuchadnezzar,
Like I said, I'm fine with all of that stuff at the top. I'm fine with multiple nations, sure, but you give a specific person, Nebuchadnezzar, King of Kings, and then you give a specific outcome for what's going to happen. He's going to destroy Tyre and make it good for nothing but drying fishing nets, and it'll never be rebuilt. Now we know that Nebuchadnezzar waged war and did not win. I mean, he ultimately said he spent so many resources on it that it was no longer worth his effort to go finish seizing Tyre.
Yeah,
And
it
then
was
he
a
withdrew his
13
troops.
13-year
yeah,
siege that
so look
essentially
again,
resulted in a tie.
as I said, I believe that it was a prophecy to say that many nations were going to come up against Tyre. It will be destroyed. Let me give you specifics about one incident when Nebuchadnezzar comes up against it, but ultimately it was only fulfilled when it was reduced to ashes in 1291. I'm not really seeing this as a problem here.
Well,
Um,
okay, let me ask you something. So your name is Liam. I see your full name, but it's hidden for the purpose of the camera. We won't call it out. But for the sake of this conversation, we're going to talk about you, Liam. If I said that you're going to get on a plane on January 1st, 2025, and you're going to fly to Los Angeles, California, and when you're there, you're going to buy a pink suitcase, right? If I say that, I've made a prophecy about you. And then if on January 1st, 2025, someone by the name of Liam gets on a plane and flies to Los Angeles, and someone also buys a pink suitcase, did my prophecy come true?
okay, wait. So
So,
hold
like,
on.
to just try,
No, no, no,
try
no,
to
no, no, cool.
clarify the thing. So, let me try to clarify
Okay.
his point.
Um,
Can I try to clarify his point? So, he's saying, so there's a prophecy made about Facade that he was going to do a bunch of things. And then we find out that somebody else do those things that was prophesied about Facade. Is the other person doing those things? Does that mean the prophecy was fulfilled? Like, for instance, if I say Donald Trump is going to win the election in November, and then Kamala Harris win, is it still a fulfilled prophecy because somebody won?
Well, look, as I said, guys, I think that you have details about what was going to happen under Nebuchadnezzar, but ultimately it says many nations, and we see that many
But
nations did come up against
but
Tyre.
here's
It's
here's
the
the thing. So
details
it
that
says
matter, right?
This is kind of how I'm going to be like this one. If you're looking at your particular what was that illustration about Donald Trump? If someone was to prophesy that Donald Trump was going to win, but then Kamala Harris wins now, and we'd be like, oh, I guess it's a failed prophecy. But then if Donald Trump was to then win in 2020, it's every 5 years, guys. In
yeah,
2029,
4 years. But I
then
said if he's gonna win
it's every
in
4 years.
November,
Sorry, it's
if I
every
say
5 years.
this
Yeah.
November,
But by the way, if I said, if I were just a person listening to someone who claimed prophecy, and they said that Donald Trump was going to win this November, and he didn't win until 4 years from now, November, I'd say that was a failed prophecy, because
Yes,
also
what you did is
yes,
made a
yes.
statement that was incorrect.
also to make it more analogous, you can't have Donald Trump winning the next election because it's not like
Because
Nebuchadnezzar came
Nebuchadnezzar never
later and
won.
conquered this.
If
Yeah.
in your prophecy you said it was going to be 2024 and it only happens in 2028, then there's an issue here. I don't see it being an issue because it happens to say you are going to be destroyed. Many nations are going to come against you. And then here's one person that's going to come against you. This is what they're going to do. But ultimately, the ultimate
Pause right there. Pause right there for a second, though.
1250.
Can you pause right there for a second? Because you said, here's one person that's going to come against you, and this is what they're going to do. That this is where we're going to do is a really big glaze over of a failed prophecy. Because you said, this person, Nebuchadnezzar, king of kings, king of Babylon, is going to come against Tyre and destroy it. That never happened. That's what this is what you're going to do is in your context. It's like saying Donald Trump's going to win the election, and then Donald Trump never wins the election because Nebuchadnezzar when tried to seize Tyre, never successfully seized Tyre. It just.
But you're saying
happen.
so somebody eventually does win the election, so it's fulfilled. So look at this passage, right? So it says,
I'm just saying, I'm looking
from
at
the
it
north. Can I read this passage? It says, from the north, I'm going to bring against Tyre Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Right?
Which happened.
This is verse 7. Okay, and now in 8 it uses pronouns. Right now, when it says he, who it's referring to Nebuchadnezzar. Can we agree?
Yes.
You agree that he is Nebuchadnezzar?
Yes.
Okay, so it says he will ravage your settlements on the mainland with the swords. He will set up siege works against you, build a ramp up to your walls, and raise his shields against you. Right? He, again, Nebuchadnezzar. No, hold on. Nebuchadnezzar will direct the blows of his battering rams against your walls and demolish your towers with his weapons. He didn't do this. His, Nebuchadnezzar's horses will be so many that they will cover you with dust. Your walls will tremble at the noise of the war horses and wagons, obviously referring to Nebuchadnezzar's. The hooves of his horses, Nebuchadnezzar, right? It's talking about, so every pronoun is obviously referring to Nebuchadnezzar throughout. So if Nebuchadnezzar doesn't do this, then it's a failed prophecy, even if someone else does it. If I say Donald Trump will win in November, he will be win the electoral college. He will be sworn in on January 20th. He will be the president for the next 4 years, and blah 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 blah. And then we find out Kamala Harris did it, and we're like, oh, the prophecy works because it wasn't Trump, but somebody actually did do it. This is the argument you're making when in this passage it's clearly referencing Nebuchadnezzar.
So,
Dan, to answer your question, kind of. So Tyre's, what I would call mainland, was actually an island before some historical events that happened later. And it was a walled city on an island. So as far as the mainland goes, that's what I would refer to it as. If you're talking about mainland, that which was connected on the other side of a future isthmus, that was a trading port that was owned by Tyre, that they used to ship ships back and forth for goods and materials so they could continue to build and thrive on the island. That was partially conquered by Nebuchadnezzar, in case you were curious. That's the history behind that.
Like as I said, I mean, I'm just scanning now for actual details. It just says that we have, although the historical record of both Babylonian siege of Tyre and the subsequent invasion of Egypt is limited, there is evidence. The king and his soldiers for their march against Tyre. They found it in 1926. And yes, Nebuchadnezzar did not take the island city by force. It seems likely that the city negotiated surrender after 13 years of siege. Mm-hmm. I mean, so he did still seem to have brought Tyre down. My point is just that it says earlier, like I already said.
Well, what do you mean he brought Tyre? What do you mean he brought it down? Like, what do you mean that they negotiated a peace treaty? He never conquered it by military means, which is what Ezekiel 26 is describing.
Again, because
he did not bring it down.
I'm just saying we have very few details. The king and his
the details that we have contradict what's in Ezekiel 26.
Other cuneiform tablets show that at some point Tyre was in the hands of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, and then a cuneiform tablet at the British Museum shows that Nebuchadnezzar did indeed successfully engage the Egyptian forces.
Yeah, but Egypt didn't. Egypt has nothing to do. Like that's also a passage in Ezekiel. It's in 27, by the way.
Yeah, we can go there. We can go there later, but we're not talking about Egypt right now.
As I said, I'm just saying. But we could talk about Egypt because it says, "I will bring up many nations against you." I'll bring up many nations.
Egypt wasn't one of them, by the way.
Egypt is not one that attacked Tyre.
Guys, I'm just saying. Sorry, if I'd known this, I would have had a few more details about actually, where and when. I would have been able to.
And sorry if I'm mistaken, but it was my impression that you guys had a conversation about this.
No, I understand. I think, guys, I didn't. I just said that we were doing it today. And if I missed that information, I do apologize. I meant to ask. I thought we were just going to shoot the breeze because usually you guys do give me what are we going to talk about. And I mean, part of the thing was like it's been hectic. That's why we had to reschedule and everything. I honestly thought I was waiting for like a topic, and then I thought, oh, if no topic's forthcoming, maybe we can just shoot the breeze. I thought we're just gonna throw some things out there.
Well, let's.
Yeah,
we can shoot the breeze and have a discussion about.
You guys are saying that you don't see it as being fulfilled, and yet Tyre is not a world power. Tyre never regained its.
There's nothing in here about Tyre being a world power.
By the way, Tyre was never a world power.
Yeah,
that's totally irrelevant.
It's certainly not a major city. How many 120,000 people? I mean, by today's standards, that's like, I don't know, it's like a large village. No, it is a city.
135,000? What's the approximate population of your city, out of curiosity? I don't need to know where you live. I live in a city of about 100,000, and I'm in a
I know, guys. I was being a bit facetious. I mean, obviously, like greater capital and everything. My point is, I see it as it was many nations would come up. We have details of one person coming up. I have no doubt that there were actual military stuff.
But Liam, it says he's going to bring many nations, right? And you can, if you just look at the commentary, there is referring to Nebuchadnezzar, who controls many nations, right? But that's irrelevant. If you just scroll down if you look at verse 7, it says Nebuchadnezzar is going to do this and that and that. The destruction, to destroy the towers, drown for good for nothing, is drying fishing nets. It's not saying many nations are going to do that. It says Nebuchadnezzar is going to do that.
Yeah, and I'm saying, based on the fact that we have I would believe that is what happened when he came to siege when he came to besiege the city.
Do you realize the article that you read just said that's not what happened? Tyre negotiated a peace.
There was a king and his soldiers for their march against Tyre. I'm saying I have no doubt that there was actual military engagement when they besieged the city. That to a degree that this did happen, that there was besieging, that there was slaughtering of people and all of that stuff. And ultimately, Tyre wasn't razed to the ground under Nebuchadnezzar, but it says, I'll bring up many nations. And that leaves it open to the fact that historically we know that many nations did come against Tyre. With the crucifixion and
why don't? But I mean, like, how can you take that same attitude and be like Jesus was Jesus? Because there were many men born in Bethlehem. How do we know which one was Jesus?
What do you mean, Jesus of Nazareth, the one that we know from?
Sure, the one that was born in a manger, Luke chapter 2, that one. You know, the prophecies mentioned in Isaiah and in the other books that mention that there are certain events that are going to happen that are going to predict the coming of the Messiah. Yeah. If none of those events line up, how do we know who's Jesus? My problem is that none of these events are lining up with what it says Nebuchadnezzar is going to do. And even if I was really lenient, I'm not feeling that gracious today, but even if I was feeling really lenient and I said, sure, we'll just take the opening 2 verses of this and not talk about the 12 verses sandwich specifically talking about Nebuchadnezzar in the middle, about exactly what's going to happen to Tyre. There's still a really big problem at the end of it all, and when it says that Tyre is never going to be rebuilt, and as of right now, there's 135,000 people living in Tyre, and that is bigger than the population of Tyre has ever been. It is currently at its largest. So we have a failed prophecy. Even if I was really, really lenient about interpretation here, and I just ignored the fact that about 7 or 8 of these verses specifically talk about Nebuchadnezzar and what's going to happen. It specifically states Nebuchadnezzar or Tyre will never be rebuilt. And that is untrue. Because Tyre is a city you can visit right now.
Yeah, and again, I would say if Tyre were to truly be rebuilt, the word rebuilt would have to be everything mentioned in Ezekiel 27. Is that there'd have to be national prominence and regional influence, Ezekiel 27:3. national strength and security, Ezekiel 27:10-11, wealth and prosperity and opulence.
Sure,
Ezekiel
wealth and
27.
prosperity and opulence is probably a good way to define it. It is one of the most destined tourist attractions in the world.
The prophecy of Ezekiel 20:16 does not mean that there would never be anything rebuilt in the island. It means that, let me just read, 26 verse 14.
That's exactly what it says.
Yeah,
I see 26:14.
It will never
I'll
be
make you a
rebuilt.
bare rock. You shall be a place for the spreading of nets. You shall be a place for the spreading of nets.
You
shall
will
never
never be rebuilt.
I will make thee like the
One
top
the
of a
Lord hath
rock,
spoken.
aka barren. Thou shalt be a place to spread nets upon, aka good for nothing except drying out nets. Thou shalt be built no more. So it's not a barren rock in which people dry fishing nets. Can we agree upon that currently? The Tyre is currently not a barren rock in which people are drying fishing
spreading
nets.
nets means that I thought spreading nets means that it'll be a place where you can fish.
Okay, why would you spread your nets on top of a rock? I don't know many fish that live there.
You
Now, I'm
stand on
not
the rock
a
and
super
feed them into
avid
the
fisherman,
ocean.
but I do know that if I'm going to go cast my bait into something, it's probably going to be water, not the top of a rock.
But you stand from the top of the rock to spread your nets in. Guys, look, Tusha, as I said, Tyre would never regain the status it held in Ezekiel's day. Tyre would never again be a commercial.
Tyre is more visited, wealthier, and has more population than it's ever had.
Yeah. But yeah, three things Tyre is not. It's not a commercial superpower. It's not
It
a world
never was a
trader.
commercial superpower.
And
Never.
again, it's not a colonizer.
Liam,
It was never a colonizer.
Liam, where in the text do you see those things mentioned?
Well,
it was never any of these things anyway. It was an island nation. They literally set themselves apart. They built a wall around their city on an island. How much more isolated would you like them to be?
So they were a nation state, and they're not a nation to this day. They're not a nation now.
Yes.
And Tyrians would never again possess the riches and prosperity they had in their city's heyday.
They are currently way more wealthy than they've ever been. They are a huge popular tourist attraction. You can Google it. You can get flights and cruises and trips to Tyre right now that cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
At the end of the day, why does it matter? Because these things aren't even mentioned in the scripture. It says it would never be rebuilt. So if I made a prophecy and it says that Michael Jackson is going to destroy the island of Manhattan, he's going to flatten all the towers, they'll never be rebuilt. And then they 20 years later they get rebuilt, but the towers aren't as tall. But you say, well, there aren't as many businesses on Manhattan as there were before. You realize that's not a valid defense against this argument.
Guys, fair enough. You're not being convinced. I'm still not seeing how. I mean, I think it was incredibly accurate that it foretold what.
Okay, but what was the accurate part?
How can we define accuracy here?
You've even considered that the first two parts. You're just not happy with the fact that it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar.
I am completely fine with saying that nations go to war with each other. That's not really what I'd call a prophecy. If I said that in some time in the future, someone is going to use the word deciduous, that's not really a prophecy. It's just likelihood of people using words, especially given the fact that we have people that literally spend their whole adult lives talking about trees.
Okay. So it was one of the most important at times, the dominant city of Phoenicia. And I would have to say that Tyre is not a dominant city to,
but it doesn't say that, does it?
What?
The Bible doesn't say that, does it? It doesn't say it's going to be the most dominant city in the world, or that it will be a dominant city, or that it's going to conquer the world, or that it's going to become the richest city, or it's going to become the richest city in the area. It doesn't say any of those things. It says it's going to be good for drying fishing nets.
Right. It does say it's not gonna host the next NFL team. Like, I don't know why we're bringing up these things that aren't mentioned in the passage. There are some things There's a specific person who's mentioned in that passage, and it says he's going to do these things, and he doesn't do
place.
Yes,
And the outcome will be this specific way.
Look, guys, again, I still take it and I still see it that it's saying that Nebuchadnezzar is going to be one of the guys that are going to come up against it, and he's going to do these things which he did do.
But pause. He's going to do these things he did do, but he didn't do them. Because the things it says that he's going to do, let me finish before you try to jump in there, is the things it says he's going to do is he's going to use his axes to destroy the walls of Tyre. And he's going to bring so many horses in that people are going to be covered in the dust from their hooves. And he's going to destroy them and make them good for nothing but drying fishing nets. And we know that did not happen. Because the city still exists today. And it is used for more than drying fishing nets. So Nebuchadnezzar laid an improper siege. He tried real hard, eventually withdrew his troops, did not conquer Tyre. City still exists to this day, not used for solely drying fishing nets, not a barren rock. So when you say something's accurate, we have a specific person doing specific things with a specific outcome. The specific person attempted specific things and failed, leading to a different outcome. There's your accuracy problem. If I said that somebody's going to win the next election for the United States of America president, that's not a very specific thing. Somebody will win. Great. If I say that, Bill Clinton, former U.S. president, is going to win the next election, and then he doesn't, you'd say that's an incorrect prophecy because Bill Clinton didn't win the election. But all of a sudden we take a Bible verse that says Nebuchadnezzar is going to destroy this city beyond repair. It's never going to be built again. And you say, oh no, well, other nations also destroyed Tyre. Well, that's not what the Bible's saying. I'm sure the first two verses say people are going to wage war with Tyre. People wage war. It happens all the time. It doesn't say that Tyre is going to be a superpower or that it's going to be some, monumentous thing. It just says it's going to be good for drying fishing nets and nothing more, a barren rock. And we know that is inaccurate.
Okay. Guys, again, as I said, I believe that verses 7 to 11 were fulfilled by Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay, but
and then again, I'm just
why?
saying. I'm saying it could because he did bring his horses against it. I think that there was killing and slaughter even before the siege.
Okay.
And then from
have we still made this argument enough?
And then from verse 12, I would be, they will plunder your riches and loot your merchandise. That could have then happened under other nations, which we did see in history, did happen under other nations. I acknowledge the difficulty of it. I still think that Tyre was never again the power that it was, that it never was one of the most important or dominant cities of anything again.
So just to confirm, you think that Nebuchadnezzar made a successful run against Tyre and that this prophecy was fulfilled as correct and accurate?
Again, yes. Well, in that it was,
I really want to understand your position.
It was a siege. And then I'm just saying, I believe that the actual destruction of Tyre was then still fulfilled because history attests to that. So, yeah.
Great. Just making sure so we're all on the same page.
Cool. All right. So let's turn to Ezekiel chapter 29. All right. And it says, let's start with verse 17. In the 27th year, in the first month, the first day, the word of the Lord came to me saying, Son of man, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, that dude that's mentioned in chapter 26, drove his army in a hard campaign against Tyre. Every head was rubbed bare and every shoulder made raw. Yet he and his army got no reward from his campaign led against Tyre.
Is that a question, guys? Again,
no, it's not a question. So remember what you had just said. You said that Nebuchadnezzar led a successful campaign against Tyre, which means that chapter 26 is not a failed prophecy because you said it was a successful campaign. However, in chapter 29, it is saying it was not a successful campaign. So who's wrong here? Is it you or is it the Bible?
Well, it'll be me then if I'm wrong about that. My point is that they surrendered to Nebuchadnezzar. That did happen in verse 26. Verse 29.
Chapter 29, verse
Chapter 29.
17. Because, by the way, if it's you that's wrong, then you're wrong by pointing out that Ezekiel chapter 29 says that Ezekiel chapter 26 is wrong.
Right.
Because
Verse 26 is a
Ezekiel
failed
chapter
prophet.
26 says that Nebuchadnezzar's going to do these things and he's going to win. And then
Hey,
Ezekiel
guys,
chapter... Can I finish?
I was hoping for us to have a conversation about... like I was hoping for us to have a conversation about what... I was hoping for us to have a conversation about convincing arguments for atheism. Not that I put that out there on the WhatsApp. I thought we were just going to shoot the breeze and so forth. So
here's a pretty convincing argument for at least anti-Christianity. The Bible points out that there's other points of the Bible that it's wrong.
Well, wait. So, okay, let me understand this. So you guys are saying
I'm not saying anything at this point. I'm letting the Bible speak for me.
No. You're saying that the Bible fails, even though history tells us that they, see, because
the biblical history. By the way, just a really quick heads up, the biblical history doesn't agree with you. Like you think you have this article. I don't know where you're reading it from. I don't really care. But you think you have this article that says Nebuchadnezzar was successful in his siege against Tyre. Chapter 29, verse 18 says Nebuchadnezzar was not successful in his siege against Tyre. So either now you're saying Ezekiel 29 is wrong, guys, or that your resources are wrong.
Guys, you've got me a gotcha. We know from history that Nebuchadnezzar did come up against them and that they did simply surrender to them.
Well,
then you're saying
surrender.
that in verse 29, verse 17.
So to be clear, so what happened? So Liam, so what this chapter 26 says is that Nebuchadnezzar is going to come against Tyre and completely wipe out the city, completely destroy it, right, and sell off its inhabitants. What actually happened in history as Nebuchadnezzar laid a 13.
You froze. You're muted.
I can still hear him, strangely enough.
Oh, I can't hear him.
It's because he's not talking.
This audio playing in my okay, it was me. I'm sorry. Okay, so chapter 26 that says that Nebuchadnezzar is going to come against Tyre and completely destroy the city, wipe out its towers, its walls, sell off its inhabitants. What we know from history is Nebuchadnezzar laid a 13-year siege against the city that essentially ended up in a draw. Tyre, not having as much resources as Nebuchadnezzar, negotiated a peace deal. That's what happened. So 26 is wrong. You were saying that it was successful, but that contradicts what happens in chapter 29 because Ezekiel and God seems to be under the understanding that it was not a successful campaign.
Guys, you've got me as a gotcha. I don't have an explanation for this.
Okay.
I have not spent a lot of time in Ezekiel 26 and Ezekiel 29. As I mentioned in the last time that we were on this, there are these difficulties and questions that one will have regarding the Bible and with one's faith and having to find answers. I think that there is a good solution, and I think that there is an explanation for it.
Why would you think there's a good solution? Like to me, this isn't a difficult question at all. Like if you could tell me,
guys, I hear you. What like the point I'm just trying to make is, well done. You got me in a gotcha. This is something, and look. This is something that I've enjoyed speaking to you guys about because you're throwing up objections I don't usually hear and I haven't usually come across, you know what I mean? And I think that one can work on it. I mean, the thing is when one studies ancient history, you find ways to try and make sure that what you, where you have apparent contradictions, you either try and find a resolution. Obviously, like in secular history, you can either decide that one or the other is incorrect or whatever it might be. But as I said, I think just on the signing off from the last time we came out here, the reason that I'm a Christian is because Jesus rose from the dead, and I think that can be established, beyond a reasonable doubt. I think that it's something we can be as certain of as anything else. And I just think that if I did have time, maybe this will be something that I can never reconcile to my satisfaction. If you understand, like maybe this is something that will be a difficulty that I'll be like, I don't understand. I'll have to wait to actually ask God himself, how did that whole thing work? What were you actually saying? I think that this isn't, it's not as if you guys are the first to ever bring this up. You understand? I mean, there's been
we never
2,000
claimed to be
years.
the first to bring this up.
Sorry?
I don't think we never claimed to be the first to bring this up.
My point is this, that I know that Christians for 2,000 years have had to deal with these kind of difficulties. I'm not going to be able to deal with this difficulty now, just off the bat. And yes, I mean, you know, on the surface of it, it appears to be an insurmountable problem. But again, my faith is not in, you know,
The Bible?
No, my faith is in the Bible. I think
in the Word.
I think that there's been enough. There's enough that we have confirmed and that has been resolved, and that I am able to string together this one particular detail.
Liam,
Guys,
the problem is,
I'm just saying, there's this one particular detail that I can't reconcile to my satisfaction or your satisfaction right now. But in light of the fact that Jesus rose from the dead, I believe that there would be a satisfactory reconciliation of the details.
I'm just going to poke the bear here because we're already too far down the Ezekiel rabbit trail to get back to it, in my opinion. But if you think that Jesus rose from the dead because the Bible says so, but the Bible also says that it's wrong in other places, how do you know the Bible is a good source for knowing that Jesus rose?
No, fair enough. And look, may I put it this way? And look, this isn't going to be to your satisfaction, but that's fine. I believe,
Liam, and I'm being completely honest here, and I'm not trying to be rude. I do not care if you answer this question to my satisfaction. I'm asking you to genuinely consider what that means for you and your own belief. I'm not asking you to give up your religion or your faith, and I don't care how satisfactorily to me you answer the question. But I have a genuine question. If the Bible says that the Bible's wrong in places, and your main source of truth for knowing that Jesus rose from the dead is the Bible, doesn't that give you a giant problem?
Okay. Guys, taking a step back. We have, just quickly on the resurrection, I mean, this isn't even, I still wanted to, anyway. It's like this. Let's assume that the Bible is a product of, with no divine source, okay? And I mean, obviously, I believe that it is divinely inspired, okay? New Testament. When it comes to ancient history,
just to clarify, not the Old Testament. You don't think the Old Testament was divinely inspired?
I believe that you can make these arguments for the Old Testament. I believe that we've also had corroborating instances to show the accuracy of the Old Testament and everything from just what Abraham did. I mean, Abraham goes back so far. It was at a region where we have very little written records. But what we do know about the time of Abraham, he seems to conform to the social and religious practices of the time. For example, when he bought the tomb for his wife Sarah to bury him in the negotiation, what little we know about, guys,
that's not remarkable. But that's not remarkable. But if anybody in that time period was writing about a fictional person, of course he's going to be familiar with the details there. I mean,
just hear what I'm. Okay. If I may just finish, guys, what I'm trying to say is, I think that we can make arguments for again particular things throughout the Old Testament that have been corroborated through external sources and stuff to show that it is a product of its time. It wasn't written far afterwards and all of these things. But my focus, as I said, Tim Keller was maybe asked this question because he wrote a book about, I can't even remember which one it was. I just saw an interview with him. And they were asking him, why did you go to Jesus and not all the way to the Old Testament? He says, well, I believe in the Old Testament, but the person you can get to historically, probably most...
You said this last time you was on. But I'm not hearing you answer Fasad's question, though.
Yeah. I'm trying to explain to you why I believe that Jesus rose from the dead. I'm trying to explain to you.
I'm not trying to be rude, but I don't care why you think that, unless your answer is something external from the Bible.
The Bible.
Because my biggest critique right now is that you say, I believe Jesus rose from the dead, and the main reason I believe that is because the Bible. And then you say, we've corroborated things in the Bible. Hang on. You're dismissing it out of hand. If you'd like to have an actual conversation like you wanted to, let's have that conversation. Don't dismiss me out of hand. Otherwise, the conversation is null. right? You're not listening. You're not going to respond. You don't actually have any intention of listening to what I'm about to say. You've already dismissed it. I've seen it. I just watched you laugh when I asked you these very simple questions that a child should be able to answer. So, would you like to have an actual conversation about what you believe and why you believe it? Or do you want to talk about what you want to talk about and preach on the channel for the next 9 minutes? Because I'll give you that long.
You want to carry on shouting me down, but I'm trying to give you the reasons that I believe that we can trust that Jesus
I
rose
don't care, because you said, and I asked a question 12 minutes ago before you started this conversation, that if your main source of truth is the Bible, and the Bible says other parts of the Bible are wrong, doesn't that cause problems with your source of truth? You have gone on a tangent about history corroborating certain things in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, and the fact that you believe things that are in the Bible. I don't care about what you believe or what history corroborates about the Bible in this exact moment, because my question had nothing to do with those things. My question is, if your main source of truth is the Bible, and the Bible says other parts of the Bible are wrong, is that not problematic for your primary source of truth?
I'm trying to explain to you that what
That's
we have
a
in
yes
the
or
New
no
Testament,
question.
It's not a yes. Look,
yes, it is.
No.
Yes.
Yes
is the
question.
Bible your source of truth?
So let me jump in here, guys. So Liam, question. So
I think it looks better with the screen on. Otherwise, I get too dark here. Hey. Okay.
I do not care.
So Liam. Hold on. I want to try to clear up something. Like, so
you shaking your head at me when I'm trying to give you a response to why I believe that Jesus rose from the dead.
Liam, I want to. Let me jump in here.
That's fine.
Let me jump in here. I'm just.
You don't want to listen to me? It's fine.
I want you to answer the question.
We were listening. Liam,
I'm answering the question as to why I can believe that Jesus rose from the dead.
Liam, no.
That's not the question.
No, hold on.
And that, since that's the basis for my faith.
That's not the question, Liam.
Liam, you're not listening.
That's not the question.
Listening. So Liam, so this might clear up things. Is the reason you believe that Jesus rose from the dead based largely on the Bible?
It's based on the historical facts that we can derive from the Bible, and because if you do history with the Bible, if you engage with the collection of texts that we have in the New Testament, we have multiple independent sources for the resurrection of Jesus. Collecting them into one volume that we call the New Testament doesn't somehow make it less. Now suddenly nullify the fact.
Hold on. You're saying you think the Bible isn't. You think there's the collection of literature that we compose into what we call the New Testament. You think that's inspired by God, right?
I do.
Okay, and you think the entire Bible is inspired by God, right?
I do, but
okay. So here's the problem. Here's the problem.
You guys aren't listening.
No. I'm trying to clarify the question because you were ranting about something else. Right.
Not ranting. It is absolutely
definitely ranting.
You were talking about totally right. You were talking about Tim Keller and stuff. But listen, so I want to clarify the question so you can answer his question. All right. The point that he's making that if the Bible contradicts itself in such a clear way, and for example, in Ezekiel 26 and 29, doesn't that question its inspiration from God? Doesn't that question its divine inspiration?
Two things. I believe that there is a reasonable explanation for that apparent contradiction.
So
okay.
Hold on.
You asked me. Okay. I can't get to that right now. But in light of the historical facts that we can derive from the New Testament, I believe that Jesus rose from the dead. And
Liam, stop. Stop right there. No, just stop.
I know you don't
just
care.
Stop.
I know you don't care.
No.
Listen.
It's not that I don't care. Fine, you're not listening, and you're not answering the question, Liam.
Guys,
Liam,
you're saying,
listen to me. Listen to me. I'm going to be very clear here. You ready? Watch and learn how a conversation that is intellectually honest works. AAA, you're familiar with Spider-Man, is that correct?
Yes.
Spider-Man came from Marvel Comics, is that also correct?
Yes.
Would you say that statements made in Marvel Comics about Spider-Man are true in the context of Marvel Comics and Spider-Man?
Yes.
If I told you that something contradicted Marvel Comics about Spider-Man, would you trust Marvel Comics or would you trust the outside source?
I trust Marvel Comics. They're
Right, because it's the origin of this. Now, what if Marvel Comics says that Spider-Man and Peter Parker are not the same person in the original Spider-Man?
And that's
And in a different part of Marvel Comics, it says that Spider-Man is Peter Parker's alter ego. We have a clear contradiction of facts in Marvel Comics. How do you reconcile the truth about Spider-Man?
You can't.
Thank you. Now, your problem and where you just spent, I let you rant. I let you. I shut my mouth and just sat there. Yes, rant.
Rant.
Yes, the word rant. Google it because you seem to have a trouble getting to it. I let you talk. I gave you a question, and I said, you believe the Bible is inspired by God and that it's true. You agreed. You said that this problem, Ezekiel 26 and 29, is something you can't personally reconcile. And it's the primary source of your truth. The Bible is the primary source of your truth. Do you agree or disagree with anything I've said so far? Yes or no, please.
No.
Okay, now, we have this source of truth that has a clear contradiction. It says in Ezekiel 26 that Nebuchadnezzar is going to seize Tyre and win, and he's going to be rewarded with Tyre as the spoils of his war. And Ezekiel 29, it says that did not happen. So, either Ezekiel 26 is correct, and Nebuchadnezzar did seize war on Tyre, and he won, and he was rewarded for it, or Ezekiel 29 is wrong, and he was rewarded, even though the Bible says he wasn't. So either way, it doesn't matter which verse we look at, one or the other is wrong, because Ezekiel 29 is Ezekiel correcting himself for what happened with the king of Babylon in Ezekiel 26. Or you think that Ezekiel 26 was correct, which is why I steel-manned your argument for several minutes and asked you to verify, and you said, yes, this is true. And then we pointed out Ezekiel 29, which says, actually, I made a mistake in Ezekiel 26. That was wrong.
I even said, listen, guys, well done, you've got me. I can't give an explanation that's going to satisfy me and you.
And that's fine. Now, the next question is, since you have a internally contradictive text as your source of truth, does that not cause problems?
And I was trying to explain to you that my faith
No.
is
That's a
based
yes or no
on-
question.
Guys, my faith
That's
is
a
based
yes
on the
or no
resurrection of
question,
Jesus.
Liam.
My question is, how does the contradiction in Ezekiel 29 and 27, 26 and 29, how does that somehow change the fact that Jesus rose from the dead?
So it calls into question the credibility of the source of that information, because
which you claim the entirety of is inspired by God.
And guys, look, like I said, would have gone into this more. I've got a book on that I'm still trying to read through, reconciling apparent contradictions in the Old Testament. This might be something that comes up there. I was trying to say that this isn't the first, you're not the first guys to point this contradiction out. Christians have had to deal with this stuff for 2,000 years.
I do not care about other people's opinions. I do not care about what other people have pointed out. What I asked you is, now that we have pointed out a clear contradiction, which you yourself have admitted you cannot reconcile, how does that not put a problem on your primary source of truth for what you believe? That's where I'm asking, and I'm not asking why you believe Jesus raised from the dead. I'm asking if your source material has contradictions, doesn't that make you question the source material?
It will make me work to find what the solution is here, so that I can understand how these two verses, apparent contradictory verses, fit together.
So just to be clear, what you're admitting to is that you're going to ignore problems until you find one that fits your solution. That's not an intellectually honest answer, but that is an answer.
I'm admitting to this, that I believe that these can be reconciled in an intellectually honest way. I don't know what that reconciliation would be at this very point. And my faith.
And again, just to answer honestly, please. Doesn't that give you problems? Like, if you told me that, like, the idea, if you told me with full certainty we were living in a simulation, that would cause problems for my current understanding of how the world works. Right? Just because it's an intellectually honest way to approach this. And what I'm asking you to do is approach this honestly, and what you're saying is that you don't care that this seemingly obvious contradiction's there. You're going to find some way to reconcile what you believe. Is that not intellectually dishonest?
No, what I'm saying is, and not that I'm had a chance to, explain it. You say you're calling it a rant, but I'm trying to explain to you why I'm still a Christian, why I will trust the Bible,
that's all well and good. Like I said, I didn't ask you this to make you abandon your faith. I'm genuinely just asking you to take a look at this honestly, and if you I'm
saying, look, this is my whole point with regards to Christianity. Okay, I do want to understand everything. Okay, I want to understand how everything works. The things I cannot
answer. Let me ask a specific question. Do you want to know the truth?
Can I please finish?
Do you want to know the truth?
I do want to know the truth, and I believe that the truth is found in Jesus.
Hang on. What if that truth is that Jesus never existed? Do you still want to know? Would you still accept it? If I could prove to you beyond an empirical doubt, without any hesitation, if I could snap my fingers and produce to you evidence that proved Jesus was a lie, everything about it was wrong, would you still want to believe the truth?
I would then abandon my faith. Well, I then abandon Christianity because it wouldn't be true.
Would you?
Would be very difficult.
Because it seems like you're not willing to abandon a passage in the Bible, even though it has a clear contradiction. What you said is, I'm going to come up with some way to reconcile this and make it work. Those were your words. That's intellectually dishonest.
It's not intellectually dishonest.
It is.
I want to go.
How is that not dishonest?
Guys, stop shouting me down. I wasn't given what we're going to talk about. I'm trying to explain to you my faith position, which is rooted in Jesus. Okay? My point is this. People have struggled with these issues for 2,000 years. I want to go and explore how have they reconciled them? How have they seen that it is not a contradiction?
Are you familiar with the phrase poisoning the well?
Yes.
Okay, do you know what it means in the context of going into an argument or conversation?
It means that you say something to make it look as if you're a opponent. Guys, it was...
No, answer the question. No, don't back out now. Answer what poisoning the well is.
I'm just saying, I would have
answer what poisoning the well is.
I understand.
Do you know what it leaves you prone to? Are you familiar with that? Do you know the term confirmation bias?
Guys, forgive me, it's not so much that. Look, I mean, I know it was an oversight with this and everything, okay?
Are you familiar with confirmation bias?
Yes.
Are you aware that poisoning the well is the main problem that leads to confirmation bias? When I ask you to be intellectually honest about something, if you go in saying, I'm going to reconcile the Bible and Jesus and my belief in him, that's intellectually dishonest because you're going in with the assumption that it's correct and I need to figure out how to make it that way. That is an intellectually dishonest stance.
In light of the resurrection, I don't think it's intellectually dishonest to trust...
In light of the resurrection, which is based on the Bible, which has a contradiction that we just pointed out to you.
No. Now, see, stop doing that. Stop doing that. Look, as I said,
I was out facts. Yeah, that's a shame. Let's not do that anymore.
No. Yes, the fact is that even if if the New Testament was not an inspired work, it is an historically valid document. Okay?
Can you elaborate?
But as pointed out, Ezekiel 26 is not a historical accurate document. It got a lot of things wrong, but go ahead.
And it's also divinely inspired.
Guys, look, I understand that. I've even said, look, I want to go and read what have great Christian thinkers said about this apparent contradiction. Is it reconcilable? Yes or no? But as I was trying to say,
it doesn't matter, Liam. It doesn't matter because it's dishonest.
Like a 12-minute rant or whatever it was.
It doesn't matter because it's dishonest. You already said when you go look for the answers to this, you're going to do it with the assumption that the Bible is correct and Jesus rose from the dead. And your primary source of that is where you're trying to reconcile this problem.
Okay, stop. Guys, that's very unfair.
It's not. It's called intellectual dishonesty, and that's what you're doing.
Guys, okay, now look, I would love to explain to you why you're wrong about what you just said, but the last time I tried to do that, I ended up getting shouted down.
You literally can't.
Told that I'm on a rant. Yes, I can.
I will give you 3 minutes of dead silence on this air to explain how poisoning the well and confirmation bias does not lead to you automatically, and by the way, your direct words, coming to some conclusion that you've already foregone. Be my guest. You see this blinking?
No. Look, guys, that's actually a lot more peaceful, I must admit.
He muted himself, but yeah.
No, I know. I can also do that. What?
Guys, come on. All right. But if you could just go ahead and make your point.
No, guys, I just wanted to say this. Okay. Now how am I gonna I've got 3 minutes now to do this. Flippin' hell. Okay. When we look at Tacitus, do you guys know Tacitus? Ancient historian, okay? All of his documents and everything that's attributed to him is that his name does not appear in them. They are anonymous documents. The accusation that the Gospels are anonymous documents is very unfair when the way that we know that Tacitus wrote the works attributed to him, by the same criteria, we should establish that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John actually, in fact, were the authors of the Gospels that bear their names. However, my point with Tacitus is, even if they are anonymous documents, we can still derive factual history from them, okay? It happens all the time. Tacitus, Plutarch, etc., etc. So even if these are anonymous documents that were not inspired by God, they are historical sources for the life of Jesus, okay? And I think that if we hold them up to the same scrutiny as we do works like Tacitus, we can trust them to give us accurate history. Then we don't only have,
but we could point out instances like where the history got wrong. Okay. Like for instance, like think about like when I think when Joseph and Mary they returned to Bethlehem.
Thank you for
interrupting me. Shut up.
Okay, go ahead. All right, sure, go ahead.
No, guys, look, and I'm not saying that there aren't these difficulties. For what it's worth, I actually studied ancient history, an accredited secular institution, and actually seeing how you do ancient history made me see the New Testament as far more credible. I thought you had to close your eyes and take a jump of faith into it without actually having the facts. But I think that even if it was a totally secular, totally, uninspired text, it is still valid history. So now we have got Mark and Paul are independent sources for the resurrection of Jesus. You throw in the stuff that you only find in Matthew, you throw in the stuff that you only find in Luke. We've got 4 independent sources, all attesting to the resurrection of Jesus. We throw in the independent stuff we find in John, 5 independent sources, all written within 60 years of the death and resurrection of Jesus. Tacitus, I like to use Tacitus as an example. He often wrote about stuff that was over 100 years before he published. So the Gospels are neither late nor unbible. I'm just saying,
I don't see how. Are you saying Tacitus wrote about the resurrection?
No, I'm just saying that the same way Tacitus wrote about events that were over 100 years before he published, the Gospels are written within a time frame that mean that they're not late sources for what we know about Jesus. Anyway, I'm just
okay.
And by the way,
so that was a lovely 4-ish minute rant on how you didn't address.
Guys, you
no. I just gave you 4 minutes of silence. I just gave you 4 minutes of silence, and I asked you to point out how my argument of poisoning the well and confirmation bias was fallacious, and what you decided to do instead was go on a rant about the history of the New Testament and how you could look to it as a historical document. That's great. I could look at the Marvel Comics as a historical document about New York City because that place. No. Shh. I get my 4 minutes now. You can be quiet. Yes, places that existed in the New Testament existed. That's not a historical document. That doesn't matter. And by the way, I could care less if it was 100% historically accurate. What you just did was ignore my question. I gave you an opportunity with silence to address the fact that you were poisoning the well and that you were going into this, which was going to lead to confirmation bias, because you said that you were going to reconcile problems in the Bible. And what you did was try to point to the possibility that these were historical documents in the New Testament. That is a lovely way to address my concerns. And it shows me that you're not having an intellectually honest conversation. Go ahead. Say what you want to say. I'm done.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I wanted to say that we know like there are like different passages in the New Testament that aren't historically accurate as well. Like for instance, when Joseph and Mary had to return to the city that they were born for the census, like we know that didn't happen. As a matter of fact, like the census, the purpose of it was for the collection of taxes, right? And so it wouldn't make any sense to return to your home city. Like for instance, like I live in Virginia now. If they wanted to get an accurate read on how states should collect taxes, me returning to North Carolina would actually make it inaccurate, you know?
But how does any of that...
Also, the slaughter of the children that was supposedly done by Herod is incorrect.
But I like to hear his answer here. You're asking how does it what?
I don't see... Look, again, I think that we can actually trust what was written based on when it was written.
What about the point that I made? Like going back to the city, the only we know that it wasn't true. It completely contradicts the purpose of a census.
I don't see how that difficulty undermines the credibility of the resurrection.
Well, no, but hold on, hold on.
What you've been doing... What you've been doing is saying the Bible is accurate and I believe it. And we're pointing out inaccuracies in the Bible, and you say, I still believe it, even though there are inaccuracies. So that is a dishonest stance.
The last several minutes, you have been pointing out how the Bible gets all of these historical events accurate. And now, and as Facade is saying, like I pointed out one example of it getting something wrong. And now you're saying it doesn't matter.
No, guys. What I think, guys, again, those are things I'm sure that if you've done reading, that I believe that they've been addressed. I believe that they can be addressed. I believe that you can actually. I even believe that this.
But hold on.
Because
but now it's like now, but so
it's so dishonest. I'm done with the conversation.
What we're showing you?
No, that's fine. It's almost fantastic. No, I don't know. There was a lame pun there. There was a lame pun. Guys, my point is this. In ancient history, you actually try and sift through the sources to see what you can know. And what we can know is that Jesus rose from the dead. And that it gives us, and that the Gospels give us, and that the Gospels, well, okay, that's fine.
Here's why I say that, Liam, and feel free to jump in whenever you want. Feel free to jump in whenever you want. You say you can know Jesus rose from the dead because you have a couple of anonymous books that claim Jesus rose from the dead. And I say, I don't believe you. Can you please prove them? And you say, I believe them to be true. Does that mean Jesus rose from the dead? Does that mean Spider-Man is real? Does that mean that the Loch Ness Monster lives in my fish tank?
You got guys. It's category errors. It's the Spider-Man fallacy. It's
but just. No, but hold on. But Liam, you were saying that the reason you know that, but this is true about the resurrection, is because of how accurate it is in other places. But we were just pointing out with the census and with the killing of all the people, all the babies 2-year-old and under, like how that is historically inaccurate.
Look, guys,
so that it undermines your argument.
Guys, census. Look, people say that there's no record of the census happening.
I didn't say that. There is record. I didn't say that. That's not what I said.
No, I'm just saying
there is record of the census happening. We know the census happened. Well, but what it gets wrong is that you had to travel back to your home city. It's like not only was that wrong, but traveling to your home city would entirely defeat the purpose. Because now, if everybody goes to their home city, now you don't know what taxes to expect from that area. Like for instance, like I live in Northern Virginia. I live in Northern Virginia. There's amount of taxes you can expect if the people living here stay here. If I were to go back to North Carolina and get counted there, it would throw off the numbers. So it completely it would defeat the purpose, is what I'm saying. That's how we know it's not true. There's no record of any requirement to return back home.
I hate myself for doing what I'm about to do, but I'm going to ask the question that everybody wants to know the answer to that you're not going to answer.
Right in front of you.
Is there anything that I could point out in the Bible that would make you disbelieve it?
If you could show that Jesus didn't rise from the dead.
Okay, so
wow.
okay, so let me ask you this: do I need to genuinely point out a passage that says Jesus didn't rise from the dead in the Bible? Because if so, it's self-defeating, right?
Fantastic. May I just elaborate on that? Because I'm trying to make the point that yes, there's this difficulty in Ezekiel, but the reason I'm a Christian is because Jesus rose from the dead. I'm just trying to show you that.
But this is what I'm asking. If I say, like, there's 10 historical errors in the Bible that I can point out to you right now, would you then have trouble believing the historical fact that Jesus rose from the dead?
Well, look,
or no?
If you're gonna,
just a yes or no, buddy. That's it.
How's a yes or no? I've got to explain to you.
If I told you 10 things were wrong historically in the Bible and I pointed them out, would you disbelieve other things in the Bible to be historically accurate, or would you still believe, knowing there's 10 things wrong I can point out right now? It's a hypothetical. It's a yes or no.
Guys, you see now. I know you don't. You want to boil it down to. I feel as if it's false. It's false dichotomies.
It's pointing out the intellectual dishonesty that you've been having this entire conversation.
Intellectual dishonesty.
Because what ends up happening is you say, I believe the Bible because it's historically accurate. And I say, well, I can point out many places where it's historically inaccurate. And you say, well, I believe it anyway because there's other places where it got it right.
I don't know if it's like you just don't understand what I'm saying. I believe the Bible because Jesus rose from the dead and he said that the scriptures were...
You believe the Bible and you believe the Bible says Jesus rose from the dead.
I believe that
Is that fair?
I believe that history shows us that Jesus rose from the dead.
Where in history does it show that? What
historical documents do you have that points out Jesus rose from the dead? Other than the Bible.
Guys, why would I go anywhere other than the best sources we have?
My whole point! That is my whole fucking point, Liam!
And then it's corroborated,
Liam,
guys.
I don't think you understand the problem,
Jesus,
Liam. You don't understand the problem.
No, that's my whole point.
I understand, guys. It's not a problem because when it comes to ancient history, collecting 5 independent sources into one collection that we call the New Testament doesn't undermine them as being independent sources.
Yes, it does.
So, all right.
What?
Yes.
Now he's being intellectually dishonest.
You've been intellectually dishonest this whole time because now you're claiming 5 independent sources claim Jesus rose from the dead. Please list them. Please give the historical dates and times in which they were written.
Paul, Mark.
Paul, which wrote his, 70 years after Jesus supposedly lived?
Paul doesn't even
not an eyewitness, does not talk about Jesus being raised from the dead.
Paul doesn't even claim to have met Jesus.
Guys, Tacitus, just hold on. Tacitus wasn't an
not in the Bible. Ignore him. Next.
No, you can't. That's intellectually dishonest.
No, I'm being as honest as you are. Paul never mentions Jesus, that he met him, that he was alive, or that he raised from the dead. Tacitus, not in the Bible, not part of your source material. What's your next one? Let's go ahead. No, I want to hear these 5. Go ahead. What's the next 2?
You're not following.
What's the next 2?
Hey guys, hold on. Guys. Hold on. So, Liam, do you understand the problem that we're having though?
I understand that your confirmation bias is missing all of the facts here.
Our confirmation bias is what's wrong?
Can you explain?
It's our confirmation bias? Oh, okay.
Can you explain the problem? Just still man our point.
You believe that because I'm referencing the Bible or the New Testament that I can't trust the New Testament is basically what you're trying to say.
I'm asking.
No, that's not why we say you can't trust it. Because so you said the entire Bible is inspired by God, right? So now we pointed out a contradiction, and Ezekiel 26 that you acknowledged, and God doesn't lie, right? So now that calls into question whether whether Ezekiel 26 is actually inspired by God, which calls into question the rest of it. How do we know any of it is actually inspired?
No, I understand that you guys
are okay. All right, but since you can't confirm that is actually inspired, it makes no sense to use that as the basis for believing Jesus rose from the dead.
But if I wrote a history book and I said George Washington was 11 feet tall, and everything else I said in the history book was completely accurate, when you read this history book and I say that George Washington is 11 feet tall, would that not make you question other statements I made about George Washington in the history book?
You just said everything else was absolutely accurate.
If I claim everything else is accurate.
No, what I'm saying is okay, I'm just trying to say what you said. Now
I apologize. I missed the word claim. I claim that the entire historical document is factual. And I also claim that George Washington was 11 feet tall.
If we can establish that everything else is accurate except for this one point, we don't chuck everything out and say we can't trust anything this guy said.
What we do is we say there's a factual error here. Perhaps there are other factual errors we should try to validate.
Yes, and also also something that the Liam just said. You said if we can confirm everything else was correct, if you can establish those facts, well then that's when you believe those things, right? Yeah. So you believe them not because they're in that book, but because you're able to establish those facts. But that's not why that's not why you're believing Jesus rose from the dead, because you're not saying you can believe it because you can establish those facts, but because it's in the Bible.
No, yes.
Well, you're saying the reason you're able to establish that fact is because it's in the Bible.
No, guys, what I'm trying to say is, if we go through all the difficulties, like the 11-foot tall George Washington statement, and that is incorrect, but everything else is correct.
No. I just claim everything else is correct. What if I wrote a book that's hundreds of pages long about George Washington, and in it you find this passage, right? And then you're talking to two history people that have studied George Washington's history quite a bit. I mean, maybe for most of their lives. And they're able to point out other factual problems in the book on George Washington. Now, you have several facts being pointed out as incorrect. Would you still take the history book as something that undoubtedly true, minus these few little hiccups here and there? Still true. It's fine. I believe it. But I understand there are a few things that I can't reconcile, like how it says George Washington's 11 feet tall.
It would probably be from an historical point of view. That's where you would land. You could maybe say this is.
No, you would not. That is intellectually dishonest.
No, guys. This is not. This is actually what we do with ancient historians all the time. We can say stuff like he's generally accurate, but he gets a few details wrong, such as George Washington's height, the color of his hair.
Do you believe that Alexander the Great killed a basilisk?
Excuse me?
Do you believe that Alexander the Great killed a basilisk?
Look, again, I've done a little bit of research into...
You said you studied ancient history. Do you think that Alexander the Great killed a fictional creature?
No. Look...
that's the question, buddy.
I don't. But I mean, saying our sources for Alexander, just because someone claims that he killed a basilisk, doesn't mean that we now say, well, guess what? He didn't conquer the world. He didn't die at the age of 33. He wasn't...
No, what we do is we say, maybe we shouldn't trust this guy because he's saying some bullshit, and now we need to verify in other ways other than this author because we know he's spouting bullshit. That is what you do as a historian.
Yes. I agree with
you
you.
Say, I believe the Bible. AAA and I have pointed out multiple passages that are wrong, and then you say, well, I still believe the Bible, even though history doesn't agree with you.
Listen.
The Bible doesn't even agree with you.
No, guys, what I'm trying to get to is that after you sift through all of that, if you are intellectually honest and you are unbiased, you should land on the fact that Jesus rose from the dead.
No.
And I'm just
Why
saying,
would you land there?
Why?
Because, and I'm trying to explain to you, because of the multiple attestation. Because then you're trying to say that
Bible.
Paul, Mark,
The Bible,
John, all of these guys.
Paul did not claim that Jesus rose from the dead.
Up independently. They all of these independent
Paul
traditions
did not claim that Jesus rose from the dead. And Mark was the source material for one of the other Gospels. Just pointing that out. So you have
1 Corinthians 15.
Paul doesn't claim to be an eyewitness.
Yeah.
No, guys, Tacitus recorded events. He wasn't an eyewitness. We still take him as a source of
Tacitus doesn't say that people did something that is impossible to do. And if he did, I'd question those too. Just like I question whether Alexander the Great killed a fictional creature or not. Because you're saying something that goes against known medical science. That if I kill you, you're going to come back. That's not how science works. That's not how medicine works. That's not how people work. So if you make this claim that some miraculous event's going to happen, I'm going to call it into question because nothing points to that being true. If I cut your head off and I bury it in a field and I bury your body in the ocean, you're not going to come knocking on my door the next day because that's not how bodies work.
Yes, and the people who
So what you have is two people claiming that Jesus did something beyond miraculous, beyond science, beyond intellectability. And you say, I just believe him because it's in this book.
It's not simple. It's not as simple as that.
It is that simple.
Explain to me this. The people who wrote about that account knew that people don't come back from the dead. But they still claim that he did. Now that doesn't make it true,
that wrote
I don't know if they did. I don't know.
The Epic of Gilgamesh knew that the entire earth wouldn't be flooded and that dragging a person around by their hair doesn't make fields grow. Yet they wrote it anyway. The people that wrote about Alexander the Great knew the basilisk didn't exist, and yet they wrote the story about him defeating it. The people that wrote mostly about the Greek gods knew they didn't exist when they wrote the Theophany. And yet they wrote it anyway. My question isn't how do you determine why someone wrote something. My question is why the hell do you believe it when it says something that is clearly so audacious?
And none of the explanations, yes, sorry, I was going to say this, none of the explanations that I've read as to why they would write this actually seem to make do justice.
Have you ever considered they were science fiction writers?
So, but here's the
well,
thing.
that's anachronistic. That's anachronistic, and like it's a category error. I mean,
no. You don't just get to wipe this off the face of the map and say it's true because I say so. What if they genuinely were writing as a piece of science fiction?
Tribulate, so you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say so. Okay, so there's like a lot of there's some errors in reasoning that I think you're doing. So, like for one, like when he had asked earlier that what could make you no longer convinced that the Bible is true, that Jesus rose from the dead, or that Christianity is true, or something like that. And you said you'd have to prove that Jesus did not raise from the dead. So it's like you kind of threw the burden of proof on us, right? So you want us to disprove a claim. So there's this claim that neither one of us can substantiate. And you're saying that there's a book that says is real, and we don't believe the book, right? Now,
yeah,
epistemically, we don't approach claims like this. We don't say this is true unless you can disprove otherwise, because then you would wind up believing everything, even contradictions, right? So, for instance, I could say there are two apples on Mars, and unless you can disprove that, you have to accept it's true. And then Fasad can say there is only one apple, right, which contradicts the the two apple claim, and you have to believe that as well. You see what I'm saying? So even contradictions you'd have to accept.
I hear you. But you asked me. You said what contradiction, what fact, whatever would you have to show has not happened, and I'm just saying
There's
would have
nothing
to
that anyone could do that would make that happen.
Okay, thanks,
Right.
Fasad. Thanks, Fasad, Joe. Okay.
Is that incorrect? Something
sorry,
that
I
cannot be
didn't hear that.
disproven?
No.
But,
Is that your
hold
standard?
on. Let him speak.
Go ahead.
I'm just
you were
trying
going
to
somewhere.
say.
I've been done with it.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll be back for a fourth time. Hey guys. Well, maybe after we calm down after another 6 months, because it'll have to be December. No, look, what I'm trying to say is I think looking at the evidence, looking at the multiple independent attestation for the resurrection, that you'd have to say that everyone would have to come up on this independently. You know what I mean? I do believe
I got that, but the point I was making
what,
is like you created a scenario where it would be impossible to prove the contrary. So like what if I believe Star Wars were actually historical events, and you ask what would convince me, and I would say you'd have to prove that Darth Vader did not destroy Alderaan, right? How would you investigate that?
Which I would think, seeing as how we could actually interview George Lucas, that said he just came up with this.
That doesn't mean the events didn't happen. I could say like somebody was communicating with George Lucas through like telepathy or whatever, something like that, and he was actually writing actual events, but just not knowing it. That wouldn't disprove it.
Okay, it's a pretty convoluted way to try and justify believing.
It's not.
In Star Wars.
It's not at all because like they're functionally equivalent. Because I can't disprove Darth Vader didn't destroy Alderaan. I couldn't disprove Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Like I have no ability to investigate. Like it's not like I can time travel.
But then my point is, I'm just feeling sorry. You'd have to do good history. You understand? Because we try to understand why.
But you couldn't do that. What historical fact could we find that would debunk it?
Yeah, but I'm saying so we can't prove that Alexander didn't kill a basilisk.
But right, and we can't prove that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Like, what historical fact could we find to disprove it?
Like, by the way, like that's a lovely example. I don't believe either happened, and both of them are claims. So why do I trust one over the other?
And the reason I trust it is that look, what is it?
I know why you trust it, but like I really want to know, like, because I want you to understand how the scenario.
I'm trying to also formulate this because I mean the thing for me is the account of Alexander killing a basilisk 400-500 years after he actually was on the earth. You know, our earliest biographies of him are so far removed from the information compared to 5 people writing about Jesus. In fact, there's probably more, but just 5 people writing about Jesus independently of each other, all corroborating the like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it wasn't independent of each other. Like most scholars like agree that Mark was written first, and the other 3 books, especially the other 2 synoptic ones, were just copies of Mark.
No. I hear you, and you see, this is what I have to clarify a bit, and it's not what you wanted to talk about. What I'm talking about, you know, Mark and Luke, they have material that's independent, like that is unique.
That's unique, yeah, but that doesn't mean they were written independently. And Fasad writes a novel, and then I copy his novel, but just altering a few details. That's not writing independently, and that doesn't mean that it's original.
No, that's a novel as opposed to an historical account.
Let's say he writes it as something that he claims to be a historical account, and I just copy it and change a few details.
Look,
that doesn't make it independent.
Look, I don't, ancient historians, and I do think that the Gospels actually fall more under ancient history. A guy named Richard Burridge wrote a whole thing to show that it's actually ancient biography.
Do you believe a bunch of zombies marched on Jerusalem after Jesus' death?
Look, I see you guys are going to jump on this one. From an historical point of view,
I'm just asking.
No.
You're saying it's historical.
Yes, look, odd. Matthew gets so much stuff right. You know what I mean? I don't see why we should just throw this out.
It gets a lot wrong too, though, as we pointed out with the census and with the killing of all the babies.
Matthew, look, guys, look, Matthew. What we know about Herod means that the killing of the innocents is very much in line with what we know about him. He would have done something like that. Okay.
No.
Okay, but there's no account that he actually did do it. It's like if you had said it's like if you had said that Michael Jordan had won seven championships.
I'd also like to point out one really fun fact for you is that if this were true and Herod did kill all the babies under the age of 2, John the Baptist would have been killed because Elizabeth was pregnant with John when Mary found out she was pregnant, and it says John leapt in the womb. And John would have been under the age of 2 because pregnancy takes 9 months. John the Baptist lived, even though Herod claimed to have killed all the babies under the age of 2 because he was worried about his throne. But whatever, you could be right. Maybe this actually did happen. There's no historical evidence of it. The Bible also disagrees.
Guys, if Matthew proves historically accurate, which I believe it does, then we do have an historical account of this event.
No.
And I'd have to just double check it.
I thought we just
that was in Bethlehem. Jesus and Mary, Joseph and Mary didn't go to where John the Baptist was born. I stand up into correction on that one. But I don't think, John the Baptist was in a different town. He wasn't in the town that got
Herod
slaughtered.
was the ruler of all of them, which is why they had to pay services and why Herod was killing children according to the Bible.
Again, guys, he only killed
It's your
them.
book. It's not my problem.
He only killed them in Bethlehem. It wasn't that it was a whole an empire-wide purge. It was only in the city of Bethlehem where not the 3 wise men, but the wise men had said that Jesus was going to be born. So it was only there. John the Baptist wasn't there when the other babies were killed, and neither was Jesus because they had fled. I think I got a bit of point trying to address that one particular thing. Tribula, all I'm trying to say is I think that we have enough reason to believe what the Gospels tell us because of the multiple attestation, independent sources, close to the events.
But as I pointed out, you can't show that they're independent sources, and you keep calling them historical because they got everything right. And as I pointed out, they didn't get everything right. And I want to go to another thing, back to the zombie thing. Like, let's say you were reading a text, and let's say you're reading a text and you're thinking it is. Look, here's a book. It's actually the Quran, but let's say I'm reading this book and looking at it as a historical document, and then I see the graves are open and then they run into a city, right? So I see a zombie. Isn't that going to change my opinion on the type of literature it is? Like, if a history book included zombies, and not saying that this is what people believe, but recording it actually as an actual historical event, doesn't that call into question?
Thanks, Tribula. Sorry,
talk the document
again. As an historian, if you're looking at secular history, I believe it happened based on the fact that Mark gets so much right. And again, I don't think that anything you've said you got wrong. You know what I mean? Based on.
Well, we weren't talking about Mark. We're talking about Matthew. So you think everybody went to their own home during the census?
Now, what happens?
But no. Hold on. You said you don't believe any was wrong. Do you believe everybody went to their hometown for the census?
Yes.
Okay, and you realize that would completely contradict. It would defeat the entire purpose of doing the census. Because the census was for taxation purposes. If everybody leaves their hometown, they're no longer where they're working. So it doesn't tell you how much taxes you're going to collect.
As I said, I think that they did go back to their town because I think Luke has proven to be an accurate historian. I believe that, anyway, look, then we're going to be on that. Back to the zombies thing. I understand that from an historical point of view, that would be something that you might have to take off the table because we've only got one source telling us about it.
Okay, so all right, so now we're picking and choosing. So now we're saying that this actually didn't happen. So how do we know that this other resurrection happened if we're throwing this one out?
I'm just saying. I think again, I would go more for the maximal thing to say Matthew gets so much right. Topography, geography, names, all of that stuff.
That wouldn't be surprising.
That we can trust this account. But even if you want to say, look, I don't I don't think there's enough corroborating evidence for that event that he records. We have corroborating evidence for the resurrection, in that we have from Matthew, we have independent, it would be independent traditions.
We pointed out how, but we pointed. You keep saying it's independent, and I pointed out how you can't prove that.
No,
it looks like they're copies.
No, the events that you get in Mark and Matthew and Luke, they got from Mark, so that only counts as one source. Okay, historically, I know that.
Okay,
but
that's
when
two.
You get,
did I count wrong?
Mark, Luke, I'm just saying.
He's saying the other two synoptic gospels came from Mark.
Yeah.
He's saying he's only counting Mark.
So we're counting Mark.
That goes to Mark. No, I'm saying, but when you get them in all three of the gospels, it goes back to here. But I don't know do you know how many ancient historians actually have other writers corroborating what they wrote about, by repeating the facts that they gave? But it would still go back to one source. Okay. It would still go back to one source historically.
But again, so this goes back to what New York. So I mean, what Facade was saying about New York, right? If Marvel Comics writes something, like describe someone in a city that actually exists, it doesn't corroborate any of the other things about that story. Like Africa is a real continent. That doesn't mean that Wakanda is there.
Yeah, no.
Right? Okay, so even if you pointed out a bunch of other historical documents showing that Africa is indeed a real place, and then people coming to you and telling you they're actually from Africa, that doesn't tell you anything about the existence of Wakanda.
Yeah.
And so in like manner, so just because we can show that Herod was a real person, and that Judea was a real person, that Samaria was a real person, that John the Baptist exists, or even if Jesus exists, that doesn't mean that this resurrection happened.
Yeah, no, and look, God bless you for saying Africa's a continent and not a country. Thank you so much for that. Always appreciate it. But my point is, and I see by making that little joke, I don't know, guys, maybe it's because it's like 2 a.m. here, and my brain is not as flexible as it should be. But my point is, what I'm trying to say, just going back to, so if an event is repeated in the synoptics, it's considered to still come from Mark. Do you get that?
Yeah.
But then we have other accounts about the resurrection that are unique to Matthew and unique to Luke, and that indicates that there were independent traditions that didn't come from the Gospel of Mark.
Now it sounds like you're making the exact opposite argument that you're saying earlier. Because at first you were saying these arguments, we know these things actually happen because other documents saying it. Now you're saying we know these things actually happen because other documents didn't say it.
No.
You're making the exact opposite argument now.
What, guys? Please, let me try and follow. And sorry again, I've lived here so much, so maybe I'm. Guys, so if it's something that is repeated, okay, that goes back to Matthew. I mean to Mark. Okay, can I give you an example? We have okay, in Luke. Luke is the only gospel that tells us that the one thief repented. Okay. So what that shows is that there was another independent tradition that was being, oral tradition that corroborates that there was Jesus on the cross.
Which tells you nothing about whether that tradition is true.
It just also doesn't mean that it's independent.
But you got it. And look, also the Gospels were written before it would have still been considered oral history. It would still have been considered oral history, not oral tradition yet.
Liam, do you understand now you're making an entire opposite argument? Because first you were saying we know it's true because they're corroborated in these other places. Now you're saying it's true because it's unique to the document.
No,
it's you're making the exact opposite argument that you were making like 15 minutes ago.
I don't think then I'm not communicating properly. What I'm saying is this: when you have one tradition that says that Jesus, you have one tradition, okay, you got one historical tradition that says that Jesus was crucified from Mark, okay? You hear what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. Then you have another historical tradition that says a thief repented on the cross. Okay, they didn't get that from Mark. So we have two independent sources that tell us that Jesus was crucified.
No, you don't. You have a source that's... You don't. What you're saying is that you have an independent source, Mark, claiming Jesus rose from the dead. And in Luke, they give you a completely new piece of information irrelevant to the fact, irrelevant to this claim that Jesus rose from the dead. Also, it was very likely based on Mark.
Guys, for example, no. Luke did use Mark in a lot of what he in what he wrote.
Okay, but this is the classic plagiarism problem. All you're doing is adding a piece of information to the story that's already been told.
Guys, I'm trying to explain. Sorry, because again, I've spent a lot of time here, so it makes sense to me. But now, if I'm not communicating it properly, I mean, what's the use of that? Okay, so we have in Mark the fact that the people arrive and that it was an empty tomb, and they're told that he's risen. Okay, then in Luke you have the story of the road to Emmaus. Okay, the risen Jesus meets these two. Now, those are two independent sources, and while you might not be able to absolutely corroborate that he had that conversation on the road, we do know that two independent sources are talking about the fact that Jesus rose. Do you hear what I'm trying to say?
No, what you're saying is that there's this book and this author, Mark, even though that's probably not his name, that claims this thing, that wrote it 40 years after Jesus was alive. And
which is
says,
very close to ancient history.
Totes, especially when the average life expectancy was 27. It's very, very good. Good job. Congratulations. You're almost in the same generation. You're almost in the same generation.
Human lifespans have not changed. Human lifespans haven't changed
that
for about
is
2,000 years.
Blatantly false.
You're wrong. It's changed just in the last 100 years.
No, guys. Lifespans. It says in the Old Testament that God has allotted 10 years, so about the average age of 80.
It says in the Old Testament Adam lived to 960 years old.
I know. Guys, I'm trying to get to the Psalms.
No. We're not going to... No, admit you're wrong here. The Bible says people lived to 900 years old, and Jesus died at 33. Life expectancies were pretty different.
Go ahead. Guys, life expectancy isn't lifespan. Life expectancy is the average because everyone's dying before the age of 5 because of the high infant mortality rate, all of those things because of diseases. But if you make it past your teenage years, you would probably live until about 60, 70, 80
That's
years.
That's also incorrect. Soldiers often died before the age of 20 at a rate 9 times higher than non-soldiers, at a rate 12 times higher than women. Across history.
Why? Because they're in wars.
Congratulations, you're aware of how people die now. Guess what that changes? The life expectancy of people.
But because the average,
yeah, weird how that works.
Life expectancy, yes, but lifespan, no. There's a lifespan versus life expectancy.
Did Adam live to 960 years?
I think that it was I actually have been looking.
That's a yes or no question.
No. I used to think so.
So the Bible's wrong. Adam didn't live to 960 years. Another historical fact it gets wrong.
No, if everyone was living to if everyone was living to like 200 years, why were they surprised when Abraham was told? It's just something that I've come across. I used to think that maybe that was actually what it was.
So there's another historical inaccuracy in the Bible, and that is the life of most of the people in the Old Testament.
Not most. I mean, already from about the time of Noah, like they were already hitting like
numbers,
normal lifespan. So it would be more about
Google the average lifespan.
Which is a whole other rabbit hole. Sorry.
I Googled the average lifespan in the first century, which is the time Jesus was alive. It's between, can't get very accurate readings, but it's between 20 and 33.
Told you. So I told you this when I stated my statement.
No, I honestly, guys, no, I'm obviously not going to find it. Tribulate, what I'll do is, I will.
Just admit you're wrong, bro. It's fine. It's fine to be wrong. Guys. I've been wrong a million times.
Right. That's what just admit it. Like the last episode we did, I said something wrong and I corrected it.
I admitted earlier in my analogy that when I didn't use the word claim, I made a bad statement. It was bad on my behalf, and I corrected it.
Guys, the only reason I'm sticking to my guns is, and obviously I can't find it now, but a couple of years ago, I did come across an article, and I don't know why I didn't save it, and he explained that it wasn't as if everyone was just suddenly dropping dead at the age of 27. It was lifespan, and I'll see if I can find it to corroborate.
I don't think anybody here thinks that people suddenly drop dead at 27.
Yeah.
We're talking about the average lifespan for lifespan of everybody, and their cause of death could be for whatever, starvation,
If the
murder.
rate of infant mortality is high, that
Right.
decreases the
Yes.
lifespan. The
Life
current longest
expectancy.
lifespan
You know-
in modernity
It
is
increased-
on the Sea of
that-
Japan.
That was one heck of a
Guys,
straw man.
If I could quickly just say, look, I don't know.
Go ahead.
I mean, why would you believe me? But the source I had was just to say that the life expectancy was so low because of the high infant mortality rates that affected the average age that someone died at. But lifespan has been pretty consistent for the last 2,000 years of hitting about 60 or 70 if you made it past that. So,
Yeah, that,
you know what I
that's
mean?
still inaccurate because that doesn't factor in an incredible number of other factors. Like we
And
just
look,
talked
guys-
about, like being male versus being female actually
Yes,
impacts
yes,
your
all
life
of-
expectancy. It also impacts
But
your
if you look-
lifespan because women typically live longer than men.
Yeah. But the life expectancy.
Crazy, right? Like, so what you're saying is that historical factors and cultural factors impact the lifespan and expectancy of people.
No, I'm just saying that in a certain. Anyway, I'll find it. I'll send it. Maybe if you have him back again, I'll lead off and say, guys, I found this one article. This is why I'm saying what I'm saying. And if I can never find it, then I mean, why would you believe anything I said? but honestly,
It's not about believing you. If you show a document that says that, and I'll look at it.
That changed. I'm just saying it changed my mind about, because I was also like, oh my gosh, I think, isn't this a problem? Most people died at about the age of 25 in Jesus' time. Then I realized, I was okay, so most people, if you made it past your teenage years, you could live.
No, I don't think he said like most people died at the mid-20s. He was saying the average lifespan, like the average.
Yeah.
And by the way, when your average
mode,
lifespan is about 27, you consider what's called generations, like we do now, to take place in that time frame. So like, if the average life expectancy is 25, and Mark was written 60 years after Jesus' death, then 3 generations have passed, approximately.
40 years. He's about 40 years.
Closer to 60.
In the 80s, 70s. But
Closer
again,
to
if
60,
the average
but whatever.
lifespan is 25, most people then live to 50. I mean, like, we have as many people living to 50 as many people living to 50 as dying at 1. You know what I mean?
Sure, I mean that's fine. But we were just talking about the average. So like that doesn't mean that there couldn't be multiple people that live.
And I'm just saying. And I go back to Tacitus. Tacitus published in AD 114, and he wrote about events that were happening in about 100 years before he published.
But
and that
doesn't change anything. Like my point is, when you make a miraculous claim that's not backed, the standard should be hesitation and skepticism. Otherwise, we fall victim to the exact thing AAA talked about earlier, believing everything until proven otherwise, which can include contradictory information. So my point and question, and the whole purpose of this conversation for the last hour, was to talk about how the fact that there are undoubted things in the Bible I can show you that are historically inaccurate. And so a stance, an appropriate stance, would be skepticism. And what you're doing is you're saying, I have this belief that Jesus definitely raised from the dead, and because some other things in this book are also true, I'm still going to believe it. And what I'm saying is that's an intellectually dishonest way to take on factual information. Because now, anything the book claims, including contradictory statements, you now must justify, instead of saying, we're going to take each individual statement and assess it on its own accord.
So I want to jump in here. Like I'm gonna have to get ready to go soon.
I'm done.
But you were talking about how Tacitus is able to write, able to record events accurately and credibly, despite them happening before he was even born, right? So, but the way it's like, let's say if I was a historian and I was to write about World War II, which obviously I wasn't alive then, right? Now, in order for me to write reliably on that, I'm going to have to be referencing source material that's from that era. So if Tacitus wasn't doing that, then I would say the stuff he was writing isn't very credible.
Yeah, but again, if I may say,
But
Tacitus is considered one of the better ancient historians, even though he doesn't give ancient historians didn't
yeah,
give us their sources.
he's considered one of the better historians. But it is the stuff that he says about the things that. Is there anything that he writes about that happened before he was born without referencing any source material that you consider credible?
They never, yes, because they didn't ever reference their source material. Like ancient historians didn't tell us where they got their information from. It's one of the debates in ancient history.
Okay, well, in
about where
that
did they get
case,
this information.
in that case, I wouldn't say it's reliable information. Like if you're given a historical account of an event that you weren't there for, and you can't tell me what the sources were,
yeah,
it's not reliable.
But again, for ancient historians, they take him as genuinely credible. And I'm just saying the Gospels are written closer to the events. Luke even says that he did actually interview people. He did a major investigation without giving exact sources and stuff. Yeah. Again, just
so
one.
Tacitus did cite his sources.
He's
yeah. I can't pronounce somebody's name. Clovius, Rufus,
Clovius.
Pliny the Elder. I never heard of any of these people, but he was citing his sources.
Yeah, Pliny the Elder, not in any relation to Pliny the Younger. There was a historian that came about 70 years after Jesus that doesn't mention Jesus, by the way, but was around the same time as Mark.
So in this case, this is why Tacitus could write credibly about these events, because he's citing people. He's citing his source material. So if I write about the American Civil War and I'm citing, newspapers that came from that era, well, now that I'm producing a scholarly work. If I'm just writing stuff that without citing anything, that's going to be rejected.
Yeah.
But
guys, now I have to do this because I know that one of the difficulties.
I want to give you last word too, by the way.
Yeah. So, I'm just saying, this is something I'm going to have to look into because I remember.
But by the way, I don't know if you're familiar with historical oration and
and again, guys, look, I'm a bit rusty. It just says here, usually when I look into sources for Tacitus, they're usually talking about what sources might have been accessible to Tacitus. So I'm going to have to go back into my books to confirm, did he actually cite them? Or are people just suggesting what he could have consulted?
I don't know if you're familiar with oral tradition and how history was passed before written word.
Yes.
But okay, so you're familiar that stories were told, and when they start a story, they typically tell it in a sing-song fashion. That way it makes it memorable. I don't know if you're familiar, but ballads and epics and things like that, they were told in a particular way to make it easier to remember and recall the events that were happening. But also something that was typically included in historical fashion is your source material. You include the fact that this has been passed down, and you add on at the end of the material this has been passed on through the vocal word of so and so by revelation of this person by etc. And that will be the end of your song. And so that's how historical before writing was a tradition. That's how we pass down source material for history. But just a little fun fact for the crowd.
Yeah, and I mean again, so it's unlikely that Mark would have not known where his information came from. Anyway.
Guys, that makes him an unreliable source. If you can't tell me where your information comes from, this thing definitely happened. How do you know? I don't know.
With the discussion of Tacitus, again, look, I got to then confirm this, and I'll then maybe send him it. It's usually they say what he could have referenced, but it doesn't. I don't think he himself says, I went and checked this out from these sources. Most ancient historians didn't do that. They just wanted to write about their own thing. They would mention others have written about this, but now I'm writing about this without necessarily naming who. It's not to say that none of them ever referenced where they got the information from, but typically one of the questions in ancient history is, where did they get this information? Well, he could have looked at the sources, could have looked at the records, but he doesn't actually say. And I stand open to correction on that one. I do stand open to correction on that one.
I would like to point out that if there are other sources that he could have drawn from, then that is a independent source that could be checked and fact checked, and we could confirm that he either stated the same thing or stated something different. And we could also look at that source material and see if it had sources and if they were something like an eyewitness.
With so little still existing from the ancient world, you usually can't find the corroborating sources. You just have to take the word for it to a degree.
And yet here you are betting your life on something that we pointed out has multiple errors in it.
Again, I don't think that there are errors. But again, I'm not saying there are difficulties
that we pointed out. All right, last word, whatever you want to say. Floor is yours.
Guys, you remember when you concede? Like, you remember one of your tactics is to concede that the resurrection happened, and then we're going to go from there to say, what does this prove?
Do you want to do that in the future?
Sorry?
Do you want to do that in the future? That's a whole different conversation.
No. I'm just saying we did it last time. Do you have to go?
I gotta go. But I'm saying just hit me up on WhatsApp and we can figure out.
Maybe in December again.
Yeah, man. I'm down.
Okay. Last thing, I was going to say that what that does do, though, it shows that Judaism is wrong because it denies if the resurrection happened, Judaism is wrong, it denies the resurrection. Islam is wrong, it denies the crucifixion. Most atheists are wrong because they deny the resurrection. It actually gets you to somewhere. I mean,
I'd actually point out that Muslims don't necessarily deny the crucifixion.
But
I'm also going to sign out. Thanks again for the rigorous shouting. It was great. Okay. Many blessings, and I ended up not having the news feed yet to see what the comments were that were being made. So anyway, probably got ripped to shreds again.
Hi guys.
Okay, I believe that the resurrection is an historically reliable and